the readiness and implementation strategy. This sub-criterion will demonstrate how applicants have planned sufficiently and are ready to implement a project upon award. Applicants should identify the resources necessary to implement the project and provide a well-developed implementation plan. Sustainability and contingency planning are also required to address this sub-criterion.
All right, the readiness and implementation strategy is worth a maximum of 20 points and starts on page 81 in the training manual. This section should include a full description of all the resources needed to implement your project. This includes resources such as meeting space, equipment, supplies, curriculum. The application should also provide a full listing of what the project will need in order to successfully implement the project. Will you need a specialized consultant? Will your staff need any type of licensure to carry out the project activities? Do you need to order extra computers or tablets for students? Whatever it is you need, this is where you want to list that. The third element is the real meat and potatoes of the narrative. Using the completed OWP, the OWP you just completed as your outline, you want to add the details that flesh out the activities provided in the OWP. You don't want to copy the OWP and paste it here. They're two different things. The OWP and the readiness and implementation strategy are two different components that complement each other, not repeat each other. So don't copy and paste the OWP right into the readiness and implementation strategy. Your goal for the narrative should be to provide a complete picture of how the project will be implemented. For any project that is recruiting participants, the application should detail how people will be recruited, selected, and the plan to keep them participating in your project. Incentives are an option, but they should be appropriate to the age groups participating and should follow the cost principles as to their use. Not all projects will need participants in a recruitment plan. If this is the case, I would state this in your narrative so that the reviewers do not mistakenly think that you missed it in your application. A sustainability plan should be included that describes how project outcomes will continue after the project has ended. Strategies to ensure outcomes will be accepted by the community and the extent to which project outcomes will support long-term benefits to the target population. Challenges to project implementation are unavoidable, and ANA wants you to have a plan ready should any of these events occur.
Okay, so resources for implementation. The first two elements of this criterion were to determine what resources that you will need to implement your project that you already have within your organization. And then the second one is to describe the resources that you need, which you'll have to procure from somebody, either through a partnership agreement or purchase outright for the grant. So that will be what you will need to do for those first two elements. And we really want you to remember that resources could mean any number of things. Keep in mind, your meeting or office space that you need to implement your project, any equipment needs, supplies, any type of curriculum you might need to purchase, or any kinds of services. Perhaps you're having somebody come in and do some training for you, any licenses or permits that you're going to need, and any other types of services or resources that you're going to need from within your organization and from the outside that will come in and help you with the implementation and provide resources. Again, so you're going to determine what resources are needed, you're going to describe what you have available within your organization, and then describe the resource that you need to obtain in the plan to procure them. Okay, so for the next element. This is the one about the implementation plan. You're going to need to provide a fully developed implementation plan. Again, this part is, I can't stress it enough. We've mentioned it a couple times already, but the OWP can be considered like the skeleton or the outline of your implementation plan. You're going to outline who, what, and when, all those basics. The implementation plan here that you're going to talk about in your narrative is going to be the flesh or the meat of your implementation plan. Here's where you want to provide details. Here's where you want to describe how you're going to implement those activities that you already have outlined in the OWP. You might even need to discuss the rationale for your decisions for the type of project that you planned. This is where you would go into detail where for several years we were doing this procedure and we found out it didn't work in our community, so we're going to be innovative and here's our new plan that we're going to do specifically for this project. Those are the types of details that you need for this section. And this section has quite a lot of points and it's meant to be several pages long. So we notice as trainers, if we're given an application to read and it's really thin, like about 25 pages long, right away our first thought is they're probably not providing enough detail that's needed, that's been asked for. And so we'll go and we'll review and provide feedback, and that's exactly what it is. You're going to be providing so much detail that your reviewer or your reader, it knows exactly what you have planned. You're painting a picture for them to see the implementation of how your project will be run. So both of these parts, the OWP and the implementation plan, they're equally as important. They align, but they don't repeat each other. Recruitment for project participants. This is the next element that was discussed in this section. You're going to describe your recruitment needs. By this, I mean, tell us what type of recruitment that is needed. Are you recruiting youth to join your after-school teen project, or are you going to be recruiting elders to participate? Another type of cultural preservation project? Please let us know, who are you looking to recruit for your project. Then you're going to discuss, the situation. We have like 1,000 teens in our community, and we want to recruit 200 to participate in our project. And we need that type of information. We need to know if you have age limitations or any other, we need to know how you're going to define the group that you need. Then go through your selection or screening criteria. Say you're doing a big, like casting a wide net and doing an open recruitment for one of your projects. And then you only have room for 30 participants, but you have 100 that applied for it. How are you going to make that screening, and what's going to be your selection criterion? So let us know about that. And then oftentimes there's projects where it's beneficial to the participant and to your project to keep them into your project for maybe like 1 or 2 years. So it might be kind of like a long-term commitment from your participant. So we're calling that a retention strategy. As you know, the same thing with employees or any kind of participation, people are going to drop from the project, and hopefully a certain amount is normal, but you want to make sure you're doing everything possible to keep them into your project so that you can have a successful project. These retention strategies might be small stipends. There might be some kind of incentives for their continued participation in the project. It might be services you provide for people. Maybe you're doing like a workforce development project for single parents, and you might give like vouchers for daycare services or something, or maybe gas cards so that they can, keep gas in their car and keep going to participate in your trainings. Those are the types of things we want to know, how you're going to keep people involved in your project. Okay, we already talked about incentives. I gave you a couple ideals, really cool ones. Gas cards, I noticed elders In my community, if you ask them what they want, they either want the cards from grocery stores, gas cards. Sometimes we even just give them maybe like a Visa gift card and stuff so they can purchase whatever they want. So keep your target population in mind when you're thinking of incentives. And then there are probably quite a few, lastly, there probably are quite a few projects that don't even require recruiting people. Since it is an element and you're not quite sure what the reviewers will be thinking, they might think that you just didn't tell them you don't have a recruitment plan, they might deduct points. So my suggestion here is if I would flat out state that our project does not include the recruitment of participants, and so this isn't applicable for our project. You want to be very clear about it so that there's no chance for misunderstanding. Okay, so the next one, moving on to the next element, it's about sustainability plans. Sustainability is defined by ANA as being able to continue the project's outcomes to the community after your project funding has been completed. So what that means is, say your project was to write a language curriculum. Your project ends, and what ANA wants you to do is define how the benefits of that curriculum that you produced during the project, how that is still going to remain in your community and continue to provide benefits to your community. So ANA recognizes that you're no longer getting funded. They don't expect you to provide these benefits at the same level that you did when you had the project, but they want to see how you're going to continue and keep those benefits going. So to do that, the most common methods are routinization or institutionalization of the project. It's a mouthful. That is that you're making those benefits a part of your everyday operations after the project has ended. Say you're in the cultural preservation department of your tribe and you have the curriculum for the language. And so it's no longer seen as maybe like a whole project, writing and developing this curriculum. And then once the project is ended, it's just going to be routine to use that curriculum for the services or classes that you provide. You're going to allow your schools to use the curriculum, and ANA wants to see that curriculum is going to be used for many years after the project has ended. So that's what we mean by institutionalization. The other option is generating program income by monetizing goods or services at the end of the project. So maybe you're doing a cultural tourism type of project where you're going to be training cultural practitioners, people that know traditional arts and crafts. They're going to be trained to be their own entrepreneurs. And so they're going to be maybe starting an artist guild. And then the artist guild will be sustained by maybe subscriptions, or maybe they'll get, some money from the goods that are sold from the artist guild and stuff like that. So that's monetizing and providing income from the project, and this will sustain the positive outcomes from the project after the life of the project is ended. Okay, so the other one is inevitable. It's the one where you're going to continue to look for funding to pursue or to keep that project going after ANA's funding is ended. It's not the strongest sustainability plan, but ANA realizes that it is a reality. So even though you're not going to be using ANA funds to continue it, give some details on where you're going to look for other funds, whether these are through other agencies or maybe foundations or corporate giving or private donations. Be very specific as you can for this one so that it's a really substantial sustainability plan. And then, so you're building sustainability, you want to be able to build that sustainability into your project design now. You're going to identify where you're going for, and during the life of your project, you're going to be working towards that all during the life of your project. Okay, challenges. This used to be called contingency plans for a couple years, but basically it's challenges. Everybody knows who's ever, if you've ever managed a grant before, it never, I can guarantee you, it never goes off just exactly how it was written in your proposal. And ANA realizes that. They realize that there are always these challenges that happen. We're living through one right now with with the pandemic, but we want you to be able to think about these things that happen quite often. These are going to be the ones that we see the most frequently with grantees, ANA grantees, and we want you to already have like a plan B in place so that if they happen, you have a plan, and then your project will continue to progress even though you had these challenges. Okay, so the first one, we're going to start with a late start. As we mentioned yesterday, especially the native language awards, they're going to be late. Usually they start July 1, so the new start date will be September 30th. So that's a late start. And very often, even though your official start date for your grants may be either July 1st for native languages and September 30th for SEDS and ERE, very often you don't know about your award till afterwards. So let's make a plan. What if that happens? What are we going to do? Say your SEDS grant was supposed to start September 30th. You don't receive notification until September 20th. You're still technically you're still responsible September, nope, I'm sorry, that would be, I meant October 20th. Your start date's supposed to be September 30th, and then you don't find out until October 20th. So you're already a little bit behind, and but as far as ANA is concerned, your start date was still 9/30. So how are you going to play catch up? So maybe, especially things that are tied to other calendars, like school calendars, you already may be behind the 8 ball, and it'll be really hard to catch up. So what are you going to do in that case? So I suggest having a contingency plan for a late start is a must in this environment. The other one, which happens all too often, is a late hiring. Our communities are sometimes located in remote areas, and it's hard to attract people that might have some specialized skills, or even maybe have language or cultural expertise. Those sadly, those people are getting few and far between as our populations age. So what are you going to do in that instance if you're having trouble hiring and filling those positions? And how are you going to keep your project moving until you can get that position filled? The next one is staff turnover. This happens so frequently, whether it's through getting fired or quitting or maternity leave. I mean, there's good reasons too. People go on maternity leave. People find other jobs, but staff turnover is a reality. So what happens if one of your key positions has a turnover? Who's going to cover that position until it's filled again? And there are other contingency plans too, partnerships falling through, or low recruitment or low participation. What I'd like you to do is think about which one would be you'd have the most chance of happening to you, and then address those. So in the manual, it starts on page 91. There's really good direction on how to develop those challenges and the plans to recover from them. So take a look at those, and you'll have to add those into your narrative for this element. And there's the chart. We're going to skip this. I forgot that was there. Skip the chart. Alrighty, so under readiness and implementation strategy, there are additional elements for preservation and maintenance in the Esther Martinez, and they're numbered 30 in those FOAs. What this one wants you to do is give your plan to your development plan for materials produced by the project. So whether it's like a book that we show in the picture, or whether you're developing a curriculum, A&E wants to know how your products can be shared with other Native American tribes or groups or organizations. And then you should also identify those areas where you have like cultural, intellectual and cultural property ownership over, and you don't really want to share that. You can also identify that too, but mainly you want to provide a plan on how other tribes can use your materials and adapt it to their own language or something, so that there's a plan to be shared between other tribes. So the types of things you might be developing that need to be shared, what A&A would like to know how we can share them, would be your materials, whether you're doing books or apps or curriculum, any software apps or equipment that you're using, how that can be shared. You need to provide the description of the method and how the method can be modified or replicated by others, and how to best store those materials. Okay, so specific to EMI this time is 3 more elements, and they basically are providing a narrative that goes into the explicit implementation of delivering the minimum of 500 hours of instruction in the native language. So much like your implementation plan that you did earlier, this one's going to be very specific to just the language instruction. And again, you don't want to skip on the detail. You want to provide a clear picture of your instruction plan. The next one is number 32, is the plan for parental engagement, which I find is really awesome, especially like if you have the commitment to put your children in an immersion school or a language nest. There's really no point in doing it if you yourself as a parent aren't also learning the language too, so that the language can continue. So once they're in school, they come home to your home environment where you're also continuing to use the language. This is something I think is just awesome. So you want to give your plan for how you're going to keep those parents engaged. Are you going to provide a special class for them? Are you going to share materials for them? You're going to maybe provide some tapes or CDs, or people still use CDs and tapes? I don't know, but you want to make sure that they're going to learn the language along with their children. Okay, and the next one is about the documentation, certifying. If you remember, for Anesta Martinez, in order to be eligible to receive the award, you have to have a site-based immersion program that's been in place for 3 years. So you have 3 years experience operating this immersion program, whether it's a language nest or survival school, or if you provide instruction under that public law citation on the screen, you need to self-certify that you have met that certification requirement, and you're going to include an official document in your appendices of your application.
Thank you for watching this video. We hope this video has been helpful in understanding the readiness and implementation strategy. If you have any questions about this video or the ANA application process, our contact information is on the screen. Good luck with your applications, and we look forward to reading them.